All right. Welcome to those of you who are joining us. We're getting ready to start our second session with Michael Held from Steelcase in just a moment. Make yourself comfortable. And I'm going to admit people for a couple more minutes. And we'll begin shortly. Welcome. See some of the same faces back. That's nice. Okay. Good to see you back again. All right. So we're top of the hour. Michael, I'm going to do this for about 60 more seconds and then we'll start.
Sure.
All right, those of you who are just joining, welcome. We'll get underway shortly. Welcome to our summit for the first quarter, our second hour today with Michael Held of Steelcase. Michael was just saying, we've all become broadcasters in this. Sometimes I'm better at it than others. We'll see.
Yeah, I think we all started to learn how to make makeup movies on TikTok and all that, like with all the professional lighting equipment.
Yeah,
learning fast.
it's fun. I have done a couple of those, I have to confess. All right, so let's get started. We have a lot to cover today, and I want to give Michael maximum time. But welcome to our session today. Thanks to those, I think most of you are coming back from the first hour with Hope Lucado, and what a great story she shared. Some really good examples of using design thinking and really turning the business around through some of these things. The second hour, we have Michael Held, and let me just move over to presentation for Michael. And you can see all of our speakers for today here. And I'm admitting people and talking at the same time. So Michael is the head of the global design team at Steelcase. And Steelcase is one of the oldest and largest office design companies in the world. I first knew them about 27 years ago or so, a long time ago. I was in a executive education. I was running executive education programs, and Steelcase were one of our partners and participants. So I've known Steelcase for a while. Michael's in Munich, and he's worked in Asia for a number of years and has a team in Hong Kong and Grand Rapids as well. He's on the board of one of the largest design fairs in Germany, and he's been a guest lecturer at several universities around the world. So with that, I will turn the time over to you, Michael, and stop sharing so you can share yours.
Yeah, now I just need to thank you, Elliot. And now I just need to find actually what I want to share. But since it's on the other screen, oh my goodness, how I'm gonna do this now. This is crazy. I'm sorry for that. So thanks for the introduction. I think now here we go. It's here now.
Not just presenters, we have to be technical producers.
So you should be able to see a presentation. Is that?
Yes.
Is that correct? Work better is what we talk about these days. Yeah, so sorry. Thanks again for the introduction. I think Elliot shared most what you need to know about me. I'm a product designer by training. I'm originally from Germany, but I only worked here for the last 5 years. Before that, I spent most of my time in Asia Pacific, working mostly in technology companies, actually. And only a few years ago, went back into interior furniture design for Steelcase, which is the world's largest contract furniture manufacturer since the company exists since 1912. It's a publicly listed company. And we have a bunch of manufacturing facilities and innovation centers around the world. And I want to talk to you today a little bit about what happened over the last year, what we learned, and what we feel might be relevant for all of us trying to get back and hopefully trying to get back to something that is better than what it was before, because it's certainly going to be different to what it was. But I don't want to turn this only into kind of like, hey, here's a Steelcase presentation. There's a few things in there that are a little bit more related to what I do with my design team. I don't know this network, so I hope the content is relevant. And Elliot already told me that he's going to jump in and ask me some questions to make sure that it is relevant. So at any moment, of course, we can talk some more about these topics, what I'm showing. So one of the key things to know about Steelcase is that we have a very ingrained, very strong human-centered design process. I mean, Steelcase had a majority stake in the consultancy IDEO for a long time. We still have a minority stake. So we've been working with them and the development of what is known design thinking today for a very long time. So one of the nice things as a designer at Steelcase is that if you work with our executive team, you don't have to explain them about what you're doing. They know what you're doing. If you tell them just like, hey, we're in the think phase, then they know, oh yeah, okay, we're in the think phase. Let's do that. Like, it's really quite different from many other organizations that are getting or have been getting into this topic lately. So that's actually quite refreshing. And I think one of the core things here for me is at the bottom of that page is really that this curiosity is the most important aspect of business, not knowing. Of course, we want to find out, we want to at some moment of time know things, but this constant curiosity is really what's fueling what we're doing. So for design at Steelcase, design is a language. It's synthesizing the world of ideas into tangible insights. It translates the world of those insights into the world of things, services, and businesses. We also believe that space is the body language of an organization. So a lot of companies have values and statements, all kinds of things that are published. But once you enter actually a space of a company and you see how the people work and interact there, is when you get a really good feeling who that organization really is. So part of the journey for us was that during the financial crisis, shortly before the financial crisis, we were trying to build a new research and development center in Grand Rapids. And like you do in the Midwest, you kind of try to build a new building for something like that if you're a large company. But then the financial crisis hit. And we said, well, we can't spend that amount of money, but we still had to do something. So we decided to convert an old factory building that was already had a little corner with a cafe and a learning space where we did our internal trainings next to our former headquarter building. We said, why don't we just put our innovation center in there? And so by accident, because of that financial crisis, we kind of hit on this recipe of combining learning and innovation center spaces and a social element like this cafe and canteen restaurant into one space. And that led to a published white paper that got a little bit more into detail into what we call the 7 habits of innovation, that we want to raise central questions, be observers, listeners, and learners. It's all about making ideas visual, sharing, co-creating, making others successful, being optimistic, and failing fast to succeed sooner. Like, since you're interested in this topic of design thinking, I'm pretty sure like for all of you, this is kind of like, yeah, that's what we expect. So over the years, I think working in that way, really this notion of creativity becoming the new productivity was emerging more and more. Like, the world's problems are too complex and too big to be solved by individuals or by one company alone. It's really about these kind of like networks of people and organizations coming together and creating new ideas. And so we've been at the forefront of evaluating what we call productivity in a very different way from, you know, the Henry Ford model. So this is also represented in how we are organized internally. So on the left, you see the more, I think it's called sometimes the Brockhaus model, the encyclopedia model, where you have like a lot of kind of linear silos, and from each function you pick people that are available and assign them to a new projects. The way we organize today is we bring projects to a fixed group of people, and we call these teams pods. So it's a high-performing cross-functional team of product developers that sit in close physical proximity and work on multiple projects at the same time. So it's more about having teams that are together for a longer time and bringing projects to them. That's basically how we then built our second Learning Innovation Center in Munich in 2016. That's the reason why I moved to back to Germany. And this is, you can see this fake background of me at the moment, of our staircase in that building. Like, it's a really long, nice staircase going through the whole building. This is where we were when last year when the pandemic hit. So from one day to the other, you know, my team meeting, working together in one space, looked like this, of people like sitting at home, staring out of their windows, staring into a camera. And I'm pretty sure you guys have exactly the same experiences. And of course, that changed things radically, especially for a company like us, where our business is to work with our customers and support our customers in creating great work experiences for their people in their spaces, of course, and not in the homes of people. So that had a tremendous impact on our business. That also had an impact of how we work together and how we collaborate, because everything we do before about prototyping and fast iterations had to happen or was happening physically next to each other in one space. This is where the energy was. So in the early days of the pandemic, everything kind of changed, right? So we all had to kind of start working from home. You had the pets at home, you had kids at home. Obviously, this is not the type of home office that anybody has in mind. This is more like a disaster situation, in the sense that although we have luxury problems compared to many other people in the world, we're all stuck at home in a way that is not intended to work well, or the homes were not made for that. So there was a lot of, since then there have been, and I'm sure you guys went through that as well. You can read like hundreds of articles every week where somebody is publishing about the future of the office, the future of work. You know, people started to say, well, we're all going to work from home now, and we're going to save our real estate costs, and we're going to get rid of our offices. Others had started to proclaim, we're going to have a hub and spoke model, where we say we have one central hub, and we have a lot of like external, like smaller offices, satellite offices around the periphery of large urban centers. I don't think anybody has like really a solution. I mean, every month you can read a new thing. I mean, Google now said they're going to go back and double down on the office, and they're going to invest billions in it. Whereas like half a year ago, it was kind of like, well, we're probably going to work at home for 50% of the time, and so on and forth. I mean, every company had a different kind of like approach to this. For Steelcase, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in this presentation, is we did a lot of research and studies and surveys with over 30,000 conversations. We analyzed a lot of floor plans. We went through a lot of countries. At the end of the presentation, there's a link of, if you're interested, there's a global report you can download. It's a free PDF with hundreds of pages of data of how this evolved in the different countries that we kind of surveyed. But we also directly, you know, in the sense of kind of like fast prototyping, iterating, jumped into kind of like creating hypotheses of what that might mean in the future. So we said, well, this is all about trust. So when people come back to the office, who can they trust? What can they trust? What can they touch? How is the airflow in the building, and so on and forth. And we started to prototype really quickly and made quick drawings. So this is basically from the design team. So this is not a Steelcase kind of like product that's available today. This is from the early days of trying to figure out what are the different ways of how we could help people and teams stay protected. And we did a lot of prototyping in our own space and tried a lot of different things, and did actually ship quite a few of products. Within 3 months, we developed, I think, 16 new products to shield people for when they would be coming back. That was last year in May. So that's 10 months ago. And this whole thing got a lot of traction. So I'm not a big social media person or whatever, but this is the post that generated the most interaction I ever had on LinkedIn. I just shared a few photos of what came out of this project, how to kind of like convert a regular office with simple little things into a safe place to return to. And this got like over 40,000 views and a lot of comments and shares. And I was really surprised, and it really seemed to hit a nerve. But when we talk to customers over the next couple of months, it's clear that, although you can do all of that, people are still kind of returning to often empty places, right? And places with a lot of distancing going on, and really where it's really hard to kind of like maybe motivate yourself and really try to get a feel for it's actually worthwhile coming back to that place and collaborate here. So it's not really about getting back to the office. It's really about getting back to something that is better than what the office was and what the office could be now right after this pandemic. So I want to get a little bit into kind of like what we mean by that, what we mean by when we say return to better, like learning from what science can teach us, but also what the research kind of uncovered what people really need. So on the science side, we're working now since the shielding time roughly of the prototypes that I showed earlier with MIT on particle flow in air. So this is quite interesting. Is the kind of like how does basically like a virus disperse in space? How can we identify potentially viruses in space? How can we kind of like create alert systems, and what kind of purifications or shielding methods actually might work? Because the shielding that you saw earlier out of cardboard and acrylic is something that might not be the best solution to this. But also we've been learning, and those are just 5 generic personas about the different experiences people had working from home. So there's an isolated Zoomer, named after this piece of software, where home office is really a lonely cage. I mean, you're sitting at home, you're staring at the screen, there's no break, you go every day for 7, 8, 10, 12 hours, some people more, and it's really exhausting. Then the people that really love autonomy, for them, this is freedom, right? So you can do some laundry next to this, you might go out over lunch quickly to do some shopping, you can organize your day in a much more flexible way. Than there are frustrated creative networkers, we call them, where this is just a suspension from normal life, right? So they're missing all the social activities, all the interactions. Then there are people, often women, obviously, where the home office is really a non-stop flow of competing demands, the overworked caretaker. And I think we've seen that. I don't know the numbers by heart, but I think in the US as well as in Europe, this is certainly the hardest hit group, I think, by the pandemic. There are fewer women in the workforce now than there were before the pandemic. And that is, I think, becoming a serious issue for organizations. It was already, I think, a serious issue before, obviously, to have maybe not enough diversity in leadership teams, but that's certainly one of the big impacts of the pandemic. And then the relieved self-preservationist, sorry, it's like a little bit like a mouthful, that where the home office is the only place they feel safe. People that really rather stay at home until somebody declares that this virus is gone for good, and wouldn't like to return to places with a lot of other people around. So what we're learning also when we talk to people is that some things were better, some were worse. I mean, people love that there's no commute, and in our case here in Munich, we have people that had maybe like an hour commute in the morning, and depending on where you live, London is notorious for terrible commutes. And so I think it's a lot of the big urban areas in the East and West Coast in the US as well. The ability to focus and be productive, where people can work on their own terms, in their own space, no distractions, probably not true for everybody, but there are quite a few people that love that aspect. And the range of settings, so you can move through your whole apartment. Now, if you have a big house, then of course you have a huge advantage there. I would say for urban city dwellers, especially younger employees that might have smaller spaces, this is not really something I heard a lot personally. But people didn't like the isolation, the loss of kind of social connection to other people. They became gradually less productive. The decision making was slower. Also depends a little bit on the function and the company, I suppose. But those are kind of like average from our global study. As I said earlier, there's be a link later on to that global report. You can look into particular countries, how that feels there. And the engagement was reduced. I'm not sure about you guys, but I feel like this 1 year anniversary, this terrible 1 year anniversary, and coming out of winter or something is certainly adding to that. There's certainly a feel now that why are we not done with this yet? Like it's we got through this. It's about time to get back. So the hybrid future is also one of the things that a lot of people believe in. So when we looked at this, and you can see the US numbers on the bottom, those are EMEA numbers because I'm based in EMEA, but yeah, the global report has all of them. A third of the people roughly say they're going to come back to the office full time. 2/3, I think it's going to be hybrid, and very, very few people believe that they're really going to work from home full time. I think that number is not too different from what it was actually before. So the biggest shift is certainly the people that have like some sort of hybrid work scenario in mind for their future. And so we've been looking into kind of like, what do people really need in this future that we're moving into? So I want to talk about like 5 things that we uncovered here and a few macro shifts that we think are important to think about when we talk about the workplace post-pandemic. So the 5 things that came up the most is safety, belonging, productivity, comfort, and control. They're not radically different from what people would have said before the pandemic, but they're certainly different in terms of their priorities. And safety is certainly one of the things that wasn't like on top of mind, because you just assumed, if you're living in a somewhat safe place and work for a regular company, that this is more or less a given to the greatest extent. But it certainly features quite high now. So today, when it comes to health and safety, a lot of people are concerned about the air quality, that everybody really adheres to the safety protocols. I think this is where probably the human aspect of work is really the most telling. It's one of the few places in the world where you, maybe the only one left, where you can't really decide who's next to you, right? Because today, if you have like one particular political belief or anything like that, you can pick the people that you have around you. You can go into the kind of like social streams that kind of like echo back your belief. But at work, you can't choose that. You work for a company and a lot of different people are working there. The cleanliness of the facility, the physical distancing and boundaries, the density is, of course, cost saving has been a big thing over the last decade. And so there's high density in many urban centers, at least, and the kind of protocols for visitors. Belonging, another really big thing, and I think that came in the personas out quite well, is this kind of social aspect of working together in our community. How present are leaders? How easy is it to kind of connect with people? What are the kind of social spaces that are stimulating, inspiring? So people want to have more engagement, higher productivity, talent retention. We want to innovate, and that's a lot harder to do if you're all distributed. There are good examples of distributed organizations, but even those will tell everyone that once or twice a year, it's really important to get together. And I think for a lot of people, the last year hasn't really provided a lot of that opportunity of coming together, depending where you live, of course, and depending which company you work for. Productivity, quite a bit of a drop. These are EMEA numbers. In the US, that was a bigger drop, where performance really suffered when people are unhappy working from home. I can't tell you exactly why the numbers are so different here, but I haven't read the whole global report yet because it's quite a lot of data. But it's really what people do want when they come back to that workspace. And in terms of productivity, collaboration with leaders want to have more collaboration with others. They expand the network. They want to host clients. They want to focus more than what they can today. Employees, same thing. Collaboration and focus range really high there. They want to have access to tools that are harder to come by at home. And they want to be part of that team, part of that belonging, the social component again. Comfort. This is more or less the way we talked about comfort before the pandemic already. And Elliot and I briefly talked about activity-based work before this meeting, just in a quick side note. This over the last 10, 15 years, of course, has been adopted by more and more organizations around the world. And so I think this kind of physical, cognitive well-being and also the emotional aspect of it has been featuring in this discussion a lot, creating different kind of places where people could go to depending on the type of work that they need to do. And what we see today is simply like an expansion of that. So an expansion to different places that were not part of that story before. Sorry. People want to have more control over where and how they work, the kind of freedom. I talked earlier about like how many people expect to work from home. Here you can see that a little bit more granular, like how long, a day a week, a couple of days, or most of the week. For the majority of people, it's probably going to be like 1 or 2 days a week, in some cases, maybe 3. When people come to the office, they want to have control over the space, how they work, so that, that they are able to reconfigure spaces and the furniture in those spaces in a way that fits the type of work that they need to do. So those are the needs coming out of that big study. And now towards the end, I want to talk a little bit about the macro shifts that we kind of like observe as well. So the big topics here is, again, safety and productivity, but also inspiration and flexibility. So on the safety side, we want to move from a more health and safety standards-based discussion to smart buildings and a systemic approach to mitigating disease spread. So not just like emergency procedures as we've seen them over the last year, but like a more integrated way of dealing with the topic. Productivity, from efficiency and single purpose spaces to balancing better individual and team needs to spaces that are multimodal kind of spaces. From attracting talent through pure aesthetics and saying, hey, we've got this really cool downtown office with a lot of sofas and you can be totally yourself, to focusing more on fostering a community through belonging that is creating resilient teams, resilient employees, and improving the environmental and social impact of the company. And flexibility, from a fixed architecture designed really about, this is the way we believe work works today, and we're going to build that, and you're going to work accordingly, to buildings and spaces that are designed to adapt and support more flexible ways of working. So the design principles guiding that in our view are a better balance of me and we, moving from fixed to fluid spaces, to have a good mix of open and closed spaces, and braiding digital and physical experiences. So we want to equally support team and individual work, so that we can really allow quick shifts between working alone, working together. This is something that I think in a lot of companies that have adopted agile methodologies has been the case for a while, that I think predominantly software team driven approach has been adopted more and more over the last couple of years, obviously in other parts of organizations and other type of companies as well. But it was sometimes really, really hard to support it in the right way from a facility perspective. So the key spaces that we want to provide here for is personal spaces, collaborative spaces, spaces for learning, and spatial and spaces for social engagement. from fixed to fluid, it's about really spaces that are multimodal. So where a team can reconfigure the space to adapt to the need that they really need right now. So if you're part of a team, you want to collaborate and you need some focus time, you probably don't want to go away into another building in a closed room totally, where you're not accessible to that team anymore, but you still need to have like a space where you can focus and people also understand, hey, yeah, I'm trying to get my work done here, and so I can support you guys better. But if you really need to interrupt me because it's something that the team needs right now, you can. So it's really about these adaptable spaces where furniture is more mobile and flexible, and power distribution is not fixed just to an outlet in the wall, and you have to sit next to it, more or less. Open and closed spaces also for me and we work, so from the focus work to the collaborative work, to have a range of individual options for privacy as well, and more open team spaces with flexible boundaries. So the more people come together, the more open the space, the fewer people, the more focused, the easier it is, of course, to enclose the spaces. Braiding the digital and the physical is the one thing that I feel this is the most exciting to me, not just because of the technology aspect, but I think this is where the biggest opportunities lie. Today, every space is a video space. So at Steelcase, and I don't know about your organizations, but we have a big installation of telepresence terminals throughout our buildings globally. And those are nice rooms, you know, they have like really great technology, expensive technology in them, and you have really good experiences connecting with other people, but they're pretty fixed, right? So suddenly the 4-person meeting room is a 1-person meeting room, and you're sitting in front of this screen and you connect with another person. But now hardly anyone is using telepresence anymore because everybody's on Zoom or on Teams or who knows what kind of like, you know, means to connect. So every space is now a video space. And how do we create inclusive experiences for people that are remote and the ones that are physically present? How do we make sure that the content that you talk about is equally accessible to all of them and not just like a little window somewhere? How can we represent people in a space better? So if some of us would be together in one space and everybody else would be online, then one or the other side would be disadvantaged, because like once you're together in one space, like the 3 figures and the little drawing down there, you have a totally different way of interacting and talking to each other. You see the space in a different way. So if you're a remote participant into a telepresence room where you have 4, 5, 6 people around the table, everybody is like a miniature. But now here, like I can see all of your faces, and it's a much more equal way of interacting. So how do we mix this? How do we get from a only physical, only virtual experience to a more mixed presence kind of situation? So we think a better work experience starts with a better workplace. And obviously, with Steelcase, we're here to help. And at the end, I roll just like one short video of something that we've been learning and doing also for the last year. And I hope this works. But because I did not install the Zoom audio plugin, I was told before I started the presentation, you probably won't hear the audio. I'm sorry for that. It's not too long. It wouldn't be too boring. So this is the reason why I put that in here, not so much because I want to advertise our virtual visits. Of course, you're all free to reach out and do that. But this is another one of these learning elements, right? So we built this quite expensive building in the center of Munich. We have another building and a fleet of jets in the US that bring customers to Grand Rapids, because Grand Rapids is not the top destination where everybody just flies to. Now, we really rely on these kind of physical exchanges very much in our business. And so this was difficult to figure out, but the team that is leading that has been really great and kind of developing like a little, set of tools of how to do virtual visits well and how to still engage with customers, architects, and partners in a way that is meaningful. And so it's been a tough year, but I think it's been an exciting year. There's a lot of new opportunities to learn. And I mean, COVID didn't really uncover anything new. It's more like a catalyst for developments that were already ongoing. And I think it's really up to us now to turn this into a positive outcome, to make the best out of it, because we certainly were nudged into kind of like change, and now we can. And with that, here are the links. I'll share parts of this presentation with Elliot after this so he can distribute it. So you can, of course, screen grab this or type it. But if you have the file, you can just click on it as well. So there is three parts to it. There were quite a few new products coming out related to some of that research. There's the whole Work Better research, and there's the global report that has all the data that I used in this presentation. Thanks for listening. I hope this was useful, and I'm happy to take any questions you guys have.
Great, thanks, Michael. If you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself or write it in the chat. I had one question. When you're measuring, say, well, let me ask it this way. What exactly do you measure when you're measuring, say, productivity in the workspace? Is it productivity, and how would you measure something like that? What kinds of markers or things do you look for, and how do you measure that, say, when you're prototyping?
Well, we look at different functions in our organization in a different way when it comes to productivity, and so do our customers, right? So when it comes to the productivity of space, then, I mean, they're very typical metrics of space utilization, for example, and qualitative studies about like engagement aspects and all that. I think in my line of work, we measured really with the amount of new ideas that a team is producing, for example. It's really about this kind of being curious and having ideas and prototyping them fast, and hopefully get a few through and have a few that are good market fit as well, of course. So it really depends who you ask at an organization, and we usually don't tell our customers how to measure productivity. Of course, we help them to measure productivity for spaces.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. Any questions from the group?
Elliot, this is Daria. Am I here audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Daria.
Hello.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Michael, for sharing the insights. What I wanted to dig deeper is that you mentioned the need to support hybrid ways of working, especially when it comes to the way we meet. When some people are in the same room, others are online and so on. I heard a lot about the practices from the behavioral or organizational perspectives, like Twitter is saying nobody's joining the meetings on the meeting room, everybody is logging in from their own computer, whatever they sit and so on. So everybody is kind of equalized. From the Steelcase perspective as a supplier for the physical space elements, what is the perspective here? What are the lines of thinking? You mentioned this physical presence room, but could you elaborate a little bit more on how you could further support hybrid working ways of working?
Yeah, so I can't really show new solutions yet because we're still working on them. We're also working with partners like Microsoft, which is a long-term partner of Steelcase, on these kind of topics. So we're not only looking at the physical side of things, but of course we use partners for the technical parts that we don't really do ourselves and have less knowledge about. We're not necessarily big fans of saying in a black and white way, you all should do it like this, or you all should do it like that. Because at the end of the day, every organization is different. You know, while Twitter it might work for them this way, some other companies that we work with say, hey, our needs are totally different. We're not kind of like a software company that is focusing on social network. We're building cars. right? Or atomic power plants, or who knows what. And and so we have to be open to that to begin with, and we have to understand that people are different and organizations are different. But we also believe, and this is also furthering our own narrative, of course, in the office, right, as a destination, as a place, not necessarily as an office in the sense of the Industrial Revolution, where everybody has to be there at 8 and you can leave at 6 or at 9 to 5 or whatever the arrangement is. We haven't been a believer in that for a long time, but in a more choice and control based way of working. So the spaces that we imagine will allow people to still come together, be together, have a space where an organization can foster their culture and can evolve their culture, have the dialogue that is needed. But maybe the office as a hub will become less of a, traditional productivity center where you say, I need to get through so many hours of work every day, but will become more like a social destination where the experience is more in the foreground, and elements that can be easily done alone could be then done in a different way, be it at home, be it in a co-working location, be it in a satellite office. Again, this will be different for different organizations. The spaces that enable that will be more flexible than the kind of telepresence rooms that I mentioned earlier, where you usually have fixed technology against the wall and some sort of fixed furniture because you have like a cable or something like that that people plug into their notebook to look at Excel sheets or PowerPoint files or whatever they do. We imagine a much more flexible environment where power as well as amplification devices, audio, video, including microphones, can be arranged and rearranged to meet the needs of that team at that moment of time. And where remote participants are physically represented. I'm not talking about like weird robots, like years ago we had these iPads on wheels that drove around. We had a couple of those, and you always had to help them when they fell down the stairs or something else happened to them. But a way to better represent people physically. I mean, there are some companies that go into extremes and say, we're all going to be in VR because then it's totally equal, no advantage anymore. And that's interesting. And there are interesting things coming out of this. So one of the things that we've learned, for example, is that people with disability have a much better experience now participating. Because before it was sometimes really hard, depending again on the organization, the country, the building that you're in, to do that. So this has been also liberating for some people, and I think we can learn from that. So the spaces that we imagine are more inclusive and flexible.
So Michael, question, if you were what would you suggest to someone who's thinking about physical workspace, to any of us here? What would be maybe 3 most important things to think about if we're considering how to engage our leadership and our colleagues in redesigning the workspace? What are 2 or 3 areas you would suggest to start with?
I guess, first of all, it needs to be a destination where people want to get to, so go to. It needs to be something that you're looking forward to. It cannot be a place where you say, well, I have to go there. I think it needs to be an exciting destination. It needs to provide, I think, the right freedom to choose how you want to work and when you want to work, whom you're going to work with. And the third aspect is probably the thing that most organizations worry about at the moment, and me too. And I don't think anybody has cracked this, is how do you figure out who's in and who's not? Like if everybody works only a few days, do you all go like on WhatsApp before or on Signal or Telegram or whatever kind of like encrypted method now everybody's using to say we all going to go in that day, and then only the cool people are in on Tuesdays and Wednesday, and on Thursday and Friday are the people that nobody wants to see, like from the mind of one person. I'm not saying that this is true, obviously. So I think this is a tough one to crack. This is one where I feel our social fabric is actually required to make it work well, like in good neighborhoods, right? So if you don't know anyone next living around you, then, why would anybody, worry about like somebody entering your house that is not supposed to enter it? But if you know the people, you'll figure out. And I think if you know the people well that you work with, then these things can also organize themselves a little bit. But I think that's a big question that at the moment everybody's asking: who's in and who's not? Is it worthwhile coming?
Yeah. Thank you. So Hanna Jorgensen asks, what do you consider the biggest challenges to overcome in terms of making the ambition of coming back to a work better scenario? The biggest challenges to overcome.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a hard one. I think it's difficult for any organization to pretend that they're now suddenly someone else that they haven't been before. So it needs to be authentic. I think it needs to be an authentic evolution, an authentic response based on the company that you are, of who you are, like us individuals, right? I mean, it's some companies, and that was true before the pandemic, when they want to change, they might jump too far, right? So if you say we've been very conservative and we've been very like, it has to be by the rule like this, and now we go to this totally open and you can do whatever you want, this is not going to work. You have to pull people along, of course. You have to evolve your culture over time. And I think in the same way now, if organizations are like trying to change too much, I think this would be hard. And another thing probably is early on, and that's why I shared these failed attempts of kind of creating shielding really quickly. I mean, we did, of course, support customer with that kind of shielding, but the big solution to COVID is not to have acrylic screens and cardboard screens everywhere. It's far too virus-centric. The solution has to be human-centered. We have to focus on the people and not on the danger and the fear.
Like that. Any other questions from the group? One of the things I was wondering, while people are thinking, you shared some examples of personas earlier. What are some examples of how you used personas in your design? Right. And do you ever use team personas, things like that? Do you create any team personas for activity-based work?
Team personas, I feel, is hard. I'm not quite sure how useful it would be. So, but maybe I don't have enough experience with it. So I don't know. Individual personas we use. I mean, the interesting thing, the important thing to understand about personas, that they're all abstractions. There's nobody like that person, right? I mean, like everybody is like 2/3 of this, a little bit of that, and a sprinkle of this. And depending which day, you're more like this or that, right? So,
For sure.
what we try to do is, like, for example, of course, we're also working on work from home scenarios. It's not where we are today, but we've been opening a lot of direct e-channels, online channels, direct to consumer over the last 6-7 months. And a business that we haven't been in there before. So when we talk about like working from home, then of course we look at the kind of different personas and their needs. So if somebody lives in an urban apartment, is a little bit younger, no kids, the likelihood that they live in a small space and don't want to work the whole week at home is high, right? So they probably need a solution that is easy to have in a corner at a wall somewhere, that can be quickly converted, opened up somewhere somehow into a workstation. The needs are pretty basic. Whereas if you have like a family home with several rooms, and you have a family with kids and all that, you might want to need a room where you can close the door if you want to work from home. Yeah. Unless there's a pandemic, you don't have a choice. You just have to work wherever you have. But like if you want to plan ahead and you purchase something in order to do that, then you probably think about like, well, maybe I need to have a bigger house, a different apartment. Maybe I need a dedicated room for work. And then so the type of furniture is different. So we use personas in this context where we want to imagine scenarios of how people might use products and what their specific needs might be.
Great, thanks. Maybe one last question. How a lot of us are advising business leaders on communication for when we come back to work. What are a couple of key messages or things to think about would you advise a business leader with all of this, understanding this research that you shared today?
I think it's really this having a safe place to foster community is important, because at the end of the day, organizations are people. It's not, I mean, there are lots of systems that we build and brands and who knows what, but at the end of the day, it's people and how they come together and work together. And so having a safe space for people to collaborate online or physically, I think is super important. And bringing them back together, being optimistic. I feel this was a year that was quite hard for a lot of people. A lot of them a lot harder than anyone here probably. You know, like when people talk about, my friends ask me, how are you doing? I'm kind of like, yeah, you know, there's certain things I don't like and all that, but like I've got luxury problems, I think, compared to many other people. But still, I think it's a year that everybody will remember. I just hired a new development director in Asia Pacific. I never met him personally. I onboard this guy without being able to fly to Hong Kong. He can't come here. And it's going to change for the next year. So how do we make sure that they feel, you know, part of something, a team? Imagining to do your job that you already did for a couple of years and do that a year from home might not be appealing, but you can do it. But joining new organizations, learning new skills, personal growth, taking on leadership responsibility, and all that, those are the kind of things that I think are really hard in an environment like that. And so I think it's really about focusing on the people and the kind of community and having a safe space to work together.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Loved the presentation. You guys have a very cool company, and I love the work that you're doing. And I love the human element, the design element, and the prototyping, experimentation, and everything else. So wish you all success, and we'll connect after this. But thank you so much for your time, and we'll see those of you who are joining us in the third hour over in the next session. Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Elliot, for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.